I think real things happen when you go against what is planned for you, right? I think real, spiritual sickness happens when you're going against what God would have you do.
Loneliness is a real thing. But the flip side of that is the wrong community will kill you.
Blame and shame are the past. Responsibility and control are the future. Welcome to the Rethreading Lives podcast, where we talk about how to take your threads of harm and through the rethreaded process, transform them into something that actually helps you reach your potential. We'll talk with different leaders in our city and our country and find out what they're doing. You'll walk away from listening to this podcast with useful insights and captivating stories on how you yourself can rethread your life and your business. I'm Kristin Keen, and this is the Rethreading Lives podcast. Welcome to Rethreading Lives. Today, our guest is Stephanie Patton, who is our Assistant Manager of Business Development at Rethreaded and also Survivor Advocate. She is amazing. She's really funny. She usually provides the joke of the day, which I appreciate.
She thinks she's funnier than she is. That's for sure.
I think you're hilarious.
Thank you.
And then she loves the Jags fan. She is not a fair weather fan.
No.
She is a
true blue. Every
year is a Super Bowl year. Every year.
This year's really a Super Bowl year, just so we're
clear.
Yeah.
She was Survivor Advocate of the Year for the state of Florida. She was awarded that award by the state attorney's office. She serves on the mayor's. The name changed. What's the new name for the council?
The Sex Trafficking Leadership Council.
Sex Trafficking Leadership Council. So she's one of 7 survivors in the city who are using their expertise to teach the city about what we need to do to help survivors of human trafficking, to stop human trafficking. And she's an amazing speaker and an awesome mom. And she loves people really well. She has a tribe, and her tribe are close.
Yeah, she's elevated the volunteer experience significantly at Rethreaded. Connects in a way, I think, with volunteers that brings a lot of authenticity into the volunteer program.
Yes.
And then some expertise and professionalism in the training that happens in the volunteer program. So I think people experience our volunteer program rather than just come and do it. I think they leave with her having poured into their heart and soul and made an impact. And so, she's expanded the circle of Rethreaded, especially through her development work that she does with us.
And she's really funny and sends me memes that are very funny.
She's really funny to watch because
she cracks herself up.
She really thinks she's funny. She's cracking up right now. So maybe you should start by telling us a joke so everyone can understand my point of view.
Do you guys want a joke?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Why not start it off right? See,
she's already cracking herself up.
Because this is the one I didn't get to tell on Tuesday. What do you call a beehive that has no exit? Unbelievable.
You see what I mean?
You
Everyone right now is.
I had to do 2 laps for that one.
There's probably a car that just drove off the Matthews Bridge because of that.
That was funny.
Mm-hmm.
I give you credit.
Yeah, that was funny. Okay.
So why don't you tell us about where you're at now in your life, Stephanie?
I would say my life right now is in a really good place. I'm living, and I have my own house. It took me a long time to get into my own house to be able to be stable enough to provide for myself and both of my kids. So I'm a single mom. So, I'm in my own house. My kids have their own rooms, their own bathroom, which is the best part. So
nice.
I counted down the days to them having their own bathroom. And so, I'm in my own house with my kids. They just got into a new school that is really great for them. And so I think that this year is going to be a great year for them. And it's a place that's going to help them be more successful. So I think my kids are really happy, which helps me be happier. Because they just had such a great summer. They're 11 and 7, and it's a boy and a girl. And so they fight. Like, I used to describe it to people as two feral cats that found a cat of tuna. That's like how I would describe my kids. And, but over this last summer, they just really, we had the new house and they just really like bonded with each other. And now they just love each other so well. So everything's been a lot calmer. They have their own spaces that they can go to. And so I think I'm in a really good place with my job. I feel really good about, where we're going at Rethreaded, the path that I'm on at Rethreaded, and how I've been growing over the years. Because I can look back at, my first year at Rethreaded and remember, that it wasn't the best. Right. And there's been a lot of growth over the years, and I can see that, and I can see that continuing to happen. So I feel really good about this year and where I'm at in that. And then in my personal life, in my volunteering life, with the Survivor Leadership Council, the Sex Trafficking Leadership Council, we've started meeting regularly, and we've started to really pull together a game plan on the things that we're going to do and where we're headed. And so that feels good that we're making some movement with the things that we can do in the city. And it feels great to be a part of that, because this is my city, right? I grew up here, I'm from here. And the change that I have the opportunity to make is here in my city, in my community. And so I feel really great about the movement that's happening there. And the other organizations that I volunteer with have had a lot of growth over the last 6 months. And so getting to see them grow and getting to see them go into their next season has been really exciting. And getting to be a part of those next seasons has been really exciting. And just been working a lot on my physical wellness. Like, it's all circling around, right? Like, it's all coming around in full circle. And so I would say it's going pretty good.
Well, that's cool, because you talk about full circle moments.
Yeah.
So, maybe that's the first one we see in this conversation. But
yeah.
And you also, some of that stuff's relatively fresh, so relatively new. And so one of the things that we talk about and have over the last few podcasts is sometimes you can't do it all at once.
No.
Sometimes it requires healing to get to a place where you can heal. And so, some of those things are relatively new in your life, and you didn't just dump them all in, and now finally it's all coming out. It's been step by step by step, and now some of those final pieces are falling in place.
Yeah, it took a long time. And so I'm 7 years out of the life. I'm 7 years sober, and I spent, 2 years within some type of sober living or under a treatment facility. So in treatment in a halfway house, and then in a women with children's house for 2 years. And then I moved in with 2 friends who were sober as well. And I lived with them for a year. And then I had another roommate for an additional year. And then I had another roommate for 3 years. And so I think that adds up. Yeah. And then in this next year, so this 8th year that I'm going into right now, I'm finally on my own. And I'm so grateful for that, because I couldn't have done it all. It's overwhelming. It's too much. And I needed the accountability. I needed the people with me. And I am happy that I had it, because I've never been in a place where I didn't feel, I've been in places where I didn't feel secure, but never felt like I was going to lose my place to live. And I think it was because I had that additional support with me the whole time. And now I'm not worried about losing my place to live, because I know that I'm financially stable enough to be able to afford all of the things that I need to afford. I had to get to that place before. Yeah.
I think that should just be like a rule in life, that there is a process to get anywhere, and it will take time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a rule of life that no one likes to follow. I don't like to follow it, but I think of just like how many people play the lottery, because it's all this, it'll be money all at once, and then it destroys you when you get it. But like how, as human beings, we're always looking how to shorten the time and make it easier. And it is never the answer.
Right.
ever. I can't think of a time when I chose.
That quality comes from speed.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I just,
Yeah.
Even like when you think of an Olympic racer, they speed after so much time and quality speed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm going to put that in the book. Literally.
But I mean, it's true though. I think without I think if I had gotten it all sooner, if I had raced into it all sooner, I wouldn't be where I am. Like, in the time was actually better, like waiting the time, and everything takes time, and all the time that it's taken, I don't even think I noticed how long it took. Like after all these, I mean, all those years happened. I don't think it didn't take away any value from all the years that I had. Like I didn't lose anything by having roommates. I gained a lot of perspective, and I gained relationships. I built a lot of really good relationships. I went through hard stuff with people, living in small spaces with them. So I learned how to navigate through conflict with them. My kids learned how to navigate through conflict with other kids. Like we learned a lot, and I didn't lose anything by having all that time. So,
and most what I see in life with people is when they do rush the process, in my life as well, you do end up losing.
Yeah.
Like you do end up wasting time because you have to start. If you're not taking the time, then eventually you'll have to take some time at some point.
Yeah. Or you're not able to hold it.
You're not able to hold it.
You can't keep it.
You can't keep it.
You can't hold it because you didn't learn.
So how did you, because what I see in the women that work at Rethreaded and just outside, anyone going through a process, kind of resents the time. Like, how did you not resent it or want to get ahead, or like, how did you manage to go through that?
So I, for a long time, held myself to a standard of perfection and was racing time. And so I did that. And I was angry at myself for not being where I felt like I needed to be, especially in sobriety. I should know this big book back and forth, and I should be sponsoring, 10 girls, and I should be, going to 7 meetings a week and all the fellowship, and I should be doing all of this and parenting and working full time, and I should be doing this with a smile on my face. And because that's what perfect sobriety looks like. And I should be doing it now at 6 months sober. And there are people with 26, 30 years sober not doing that because it's not achievable. And so, but I had this ideal in my head of what perfection looked like. And I had these people in my life that I saw that were doing the things, that had the capacity to do the things. And I was trying to be those people, right? Like I, had one friend, and she would do, 7 meetings a week, and she would do all of the fellowship, and she would sponsor all the girls. She was also married for 40 years and semi-retired. Like she was not, and she had 15 years sobriety. Like there were reasons why she was able to do all those things. But me, with my 6 month sobriety, my kid, nope, I didn't have a car. And I was like, how I need to do all of these things. And so for a long time, I did put some standards on myself to be able to achieve those things. And I would have to say, and I said, there was a lot of things I said I wouldn't do. There's a lot of things I said I wouldn't do that maybe my friends were doing. And I I was a little judgmental about the decisions that they were making and the situations that they were getting themselves into. And then I got myself into one of those situations. And then I gained some new perspective. And then I got humbled a little bit. And I was like, oh man, this isn't what you need to be doing. And from that moment on, and this was back in 2020. So this was even, this was this has been a long process of learning and growing and changing. And it was back in 2020, and I learned this, and I was like, you don't need to be all of these things. You don't need to be perfect at your job. You don't need to have the perfect partner. You don't need to be the perfect parent. You just need to do the best you can with what you have. You don't need to, attend every fellowship dinner, because if you're not at the table, they may talk about you. You don't need to, call every single person in your cell phone every day because you want to touch base with everybody and you want to be the perfect friend. Like, you don't have to do all of these things. You can be like imperfect. You can work on yourself. You can be yourself. You can heal. Like, I was just hurting and I was just like having to hit all of these marks every single day to be something I wasn't. And it didn't work. It didn't work. And when I made a poor decision to get in a bad relationship, because I simply felt like that was the time I needed to be in a relationship because I had been sober for X number of years and it's the time and this is what needs to happen. It doesn't matter if it's the right person or not. That doesn't matter. Right. I just need to do this now because this is the timeline. And, I had been real judgmental about a friend of mine who had been in a really bad relationship back and forth for years. And when mine went south, I ate a lot of my own words. And from that moment on, I was like, slow down, breathe. The water's fine. And just one step at a time. And it was actually fairly recent when I really started to step back and not hold myself to such a high standard on a lot of different things.
I remember that time. And I remember a significant change after that relationship was gone. It was a significant shift in your life.
It was a hard time. It was right before a pandemic too. Yeah. So there were a whole bunch of things that happened all at the same time. And I might have gotten in a little bit of trouble at work at the same time. And I might have had a meeting or two that again said, hey, we're seeing you and what's going on.
Did the pandemic slow you down? Just because you couldn't for a while, or did everything else just keep, all these other things that you're involved in, did they just keep going during the pandemic? Or
the pandemic threw me off. So I'm an extroverted person and I'm also like diagnosed bipolar manic. So I'm like high energy all the time. And so the pandemic actually messed me up a little bit.
Because you had to be at home. Like we were making mess, but you were at home with your children in a very small space. And I remember at one point you were like, if you can get childcare on Saturdays, you can come in and we'll show you how to sew masks. And I was like, we're going to lose a lot more because I need to talk to people. And it was actually, and so I was at home all the time. And, but there was one person who runs one of the local halfway houses. And so all of the meeting houses shut down, all of the halfway houses shut down. So there were no in-person meetings. All the meetings were Zoom. And I like need social interaction and I just thrive with it. And he would let me come to their house meetings. Yeah. And there were 60 of them in one house. And I was like, I don't care. COVID schmovid. I'm going because I need this. And he knew I needed that. And he let me come in there, even though I was somebody that would potentially be exposing his house. And again, he had 60 people in one house and he let me come in there. And that helped me a little bit in that whole time and space. But I remember when you guys let us come back to work, the second the daycares opened up, I was like, I'm dropping my kids off right now. I'll be there. It's 7 p.m. I don't care. They're coming now. I think so many people relate to that, your story.
Yeah. It's time. It was good for me though, because it was right at the same time that I was getting out of that relationship and I was moving into a roommate situation. And I just needed it because I had been really headstrong in leaving that relationship. And I was like, and I still had to live with that person for 6 weeks after breaking it off. And I was very adamant about, I just got to finish out this lease because my name's on it. And so it was in a way, it was good for me, but it was also really bad for my mental health. And, but it did keep me in one spot rather than I probably could have gotten into some shenanigans.
So when I look back on your life, Stephanie, no, but I just want to ask a question here because vision is one of the elements of healing, the Rethreaded process. And there was some kind of shift in you around that time where you started to like I feel like you started to envision your life differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like you started to like trust God, and you're just like, I know I'm going to get a car.
Yeah.
I mean, and just like there was like a shift in you. Like what happened there? I don't know if is it a new vision? Was it a new purpose? Like, how did that get?
Yeah. So and the whole thing kind of intertwines with me with my whole healing journey, like really began with sobriety, and it really began, and that's where I began my relationship with God. And that's where, all of those things like started in my whole healing process. And it got deeper and deeper as I got further along. But in that moment I think real things happen when you go against what is planned for you, right? I think real like spiritual sickness happens when you're going against what, God would have you do. And I mean, at least for me and in my life. And, for this entire year that I'm in this relationship, I am going against what God would have me do. And I can feel it. I can feel the conviction in me. And I know that I'm simply doing this and being in this space to fill a void that I am not filling with him, that I am not allowing God to be in, and I'm not allowing him to fill that space. And I'm like, oh, you can't fill it. I'm going to fill it from an outside source. And I'm just completely cutting myself off. And it was because of I think we're built to be in community. And for me at that moment in time, I'm holding myself to this standard of timeline, right? I'm X number of years sober. It's time for me to get in a relationship. It's time for me to start looking at getting married. Like I'm holding myself to this timeline again. And so I'm seeking out whatever relationship is in front of me, not the right relationship, not being patient, not waiting for the time, but I'm seeking out whatever relationship in front of me because it's time and it's going to fill this next void in my life. And when I'm in that relationship and I'm doing what I know I shouldn't be doing, and I'm feeling the conviction of that, I cut myself off from this just communication that I had been having with God leading up to that, right? I had like this clear communication with God, and he'd, lead me and guide me in whatever direction I needed to go because I was trusting and relying upon him to tell me where to go. And so once I got into that relationship, it was just cut off. And at some point, I was just sick spiritually. I've been really, really blessed with some great friends, and I have incredible relationships with those friends. And they hated them, and I trust and respect their opinions very much. But I had dug myself into a little bit of hole at that point. So I'm trying to backpedal, but like I had lost this consistent communication that I had with those friends. Like I wasn't going to my meetings. I wasn't fellowshipping the way I had before. Like I just wasn't participating in life the way I always had. And I was just in this relationship and just cut off from God that I had built this deep and meaningful and fruitful relationship with. And I had just cut myself off from it. And I cut myself off from everybody around me. And at one point I just felt that. And I was like, you can't do this. And trying to like navigate through how to get out of that situation was where it really got hard. And I would listen to that song by Kristin DeMarco, the Take Courage. And I would listen to that song every day. And it was like, and I've played the short version for you guys at Diva, but there's like a 12-minute version that will take you out. It would take me out in the car. And I would just weep. And I would just listen to this song, and I would just wait to open up the phone line again, right? Like waiting for your call. Like but I'm just in this waiting space, and I'm just waiting for his call. And eventually one day he just gave me the courage to take the step, and I did. And I held fast in it, and I held strong in it. And once I took the step, I just felt filled with this power to keep moving and to keep going. And all the pieces fell into place. Everything. And it's not been smooth sailing since, but everything has felt good.
All right. So there's a couple of things that you said in there that I think are significant and could bear reinforcement. And, I think a lot of people find it easy to look at somebody and go, why are they with this person and that sort of thing. But if they're really honest with themselves, the desire for community is embedded in us deeply. Loneliness is a real thing. But the flip side of that is the wrong community will kill you. Mm-hmm. The wrong community will kill you.
Yep.
And so while you were searching for community in a legitimate way, it actually cut off the fuel lines from true community. Mm-hmm. And we talk about community so critical, and in the process of that, the community that you had that had fueled you and was boosting your potential started to wither. And so your sphere started shrinking until you were literally, you used the word sick. Until you were literally just, you couldn't hold anything else.
Yeah.
Broken's probably not the right word, but collapsed is probably the right word. My heart is just so frail at this point. I can't hold anything. I think that was a really significant point that you might not have worded it that way, but I think reinforces what we've learned through this rethreading process about how important community is.
Yeah.
And you have, I don't know if you learned it or if it's just kind of grown. It may have been through that process, but you're very intentional in your community about who's in and who's not.
Yeah.
About who I'm going to invest time in and who I'm not. And that sounds rude, but it's necessary. Intentionality goes all the way through the rethreading process. There has to be purposeful use of time. And that's where I'm kind of going with this conversation with the community of you have limited time and you're very intentional about how you're going to engage in community and build community instead of chasing the ideal that you used to chase. If I got to do it all, I got to say yes to everything. Somehow over time, and maybe it was through this process, you've become very intentional. So you build community intentionally with time and energy used exactly the way you want to use it. And I think that's maybe you could share how you came across that or how you learned it, or maybe it's just the way you fell into it, but it's the difference between, I think, how you do community and how even a lot of the ladies at work. I think a lot of the ladies use community as a life preserver and they're just holding on and they're working themselves to death. Yeah. And you've come through that. Maybe you could share a little of how you made that transition.
All of the superficial friendships I've had in high school and early 20s, mid 20s, all of those people were friends that were looking to get something from me or I was looking to get something from them. So it was a give and get relationship. There was no authenticity. There was no real friendship there. And so I don't want that. I don't want anything from my friends. And my friends don't want anything from me. And they are people that I feel comfortable enough to share everything with. Like, because I know that they're not going to take anything that I say and hold it against me, or they are not going to take the poor decision that I may make and judge me for it or condemn me for it, or just make harsh judgments at me, right? Like, oh, you shouldn't have gone out with that boy. I knew you were going to do this again, or they'll just hear me and they'll hold that with me. And I feel like those are the types of friendships and relationships I want. Those are the people that when I do make that bad decision, or when I do say something wrong, or if I yell at my kids too much and I can go to my friends, or if I feel completely exhausted, I can go and I can sit at their house and we can talk about absolutely nothing. And I still feel energized when I leave the room. And we didn't hash out whatever problem it was that I had. We didn't even talk about whatever problem it was that I had when I walked in there. We just sat in that room and we just spent time together, and magically it disappears. And I think that stems from a desire to not have fair weather friendships and to not have people that only want something from me, and to not have people that I only want something from, because I was a two-way street. People didn't just take from me. I took from them. And it was not authentic. It was not genuine. There's no good motives behind any of the friendships I ever had in my life before I got sober.
I know, because when I think about the community, we say this a lot, it takes a community of people for a woman to be in sex trafficking. It takes a community of people to have a woman be out. And I think of a trafficker, the sole purpose is to get something.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a twisting of like our innate natural desire to be connected, and it's twisted for the gain of someone else. And I guess that's why when women come through our doors, there's no trust.
Well, and I think for women as well, like it's in our instinct to like nurture and to give.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody has twisted that and manipulated that to gain our bodies, to like gain our souls, to take from us in that way. And so my nurturing nature has literally been manipulated. So the desire to want to nurture, to love, to take care of is almost completely obliterated because somebody took my desire to nurture, to love, to take care of, and they have distorted it in a way that it no longer makes sense.
It's funny because the power of intentionality, it can either destroy, you can use your intentionality to destroy a person's life, or your intentionality to bring life.
Yeah. And
either way works.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Intentionality is a powerful.
And, we come from a lens of faith. And so, some of that is, what we see is, Satan takes these incredibly beautiful things that God built into us. And those are the things that he pollutes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're talking about nurturing and loving and caring. I mean, the most beautiful things, purpose and vision, and then it gets flipped into the worst possible thing to hurt other humans and that sort of thing, and it just destroys, at a elemental level.
Mm-hmm.
It destroys.
Yep.
Not just makes it bad, not just turns it just takes the most beautiful things, and flips them upside down. I mean, trafficking is maybe the most vivid image of taking the most beautiful things and using them for the worst evil we can possibly conceive of.
And conceive is like even a stretch, right? Because some of those things are unimaginable. And I think about it, and I'm thinking about like I'm thinking, and it even takes me back to like the idea of like getting in this relationship and getting this bad relationship, and how not good at relationships I have been after leaving the life, because that nurturing, that loving, that giving piece of me was so twisted that I just don't know how to. And I think that that's the truth for a lot of women who are coming out of it. I don't know how to trust you. I don't know how to love you. I don't know how to care for you. I don't know how to give to you. And I think that is across the board with family, with children, with friends, and especially in partnerships, because that relationship as a whole is distorted. But it's so mixed up that it's just, you don't know how to. Or maybe you did know how to, but it's just completely reworked. You're rewiring your entire brain.
Which is why you have to have community to learn it.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned so much from my community.
Yeah.
Like we were talking the other day, both of us have married friends that I like to be around my married friends because they model this marriage. And I'm like, wow, okay, that's how it works. Okay. I see it.
And you need time.
I need time.
I mean, how many ladies do we see just jump from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next? They're still not learning because it's just one bad experience after another after another. They need time. The heart has to heal. And community can't do its work immediately. Community's going to take some time. to help a person, open. They got to be open. They got to be able to feel safe again. And I don't know how long that takes. I mean, a long time.
It took me years to even begin to acknowledge that work needed to happen. So
got to heal to heal.
Got to heal to heal. Isn't that weird?
And I didn't even know how messed up I was until I found myself in that messed up situation. And once it all started to unravel and I started to realize it. And one thing that I think has been so important because I'm on this whole empowered dating, right? I've been dating super empowered and sometimes a little too empowered. And I'll shoot something down so quickly because it's just no. But I'm able to say no, not out of, and I don't do things out of obligation anymore because I'll feel obligated to text this person back or to go on this date. No, I don't feel obligated. But one of the things that has brought me to this place, and this is in all relationships, is that I actually don't need to be validated by anybody. And learning what my true identity in Christ is and what he says that I am, and embedding that in my heart is what has allowed me to say not acceptable, or that's going to be a no, or this is a yes, because I can feel and I understand and I know my value and my worth as a friend, as a parent, as a partner, as a daughter. Like I know my value, my worth as a human being. And I know my value, my worth as who God says I am. And that was, again, something that getting it from the heart or from the head to the heart is probably the hardest place, because we talk about it, right? We talk about it a lot. And we talk about knowing who you are. And I hear a lot of ladies say, I know who I am. And I'm like, but do you know? Because I see you. Do you know?
Maybe here.
Yeah.
Maybe. Or they know who they're supposed to be. Maybe they've got that knowledge. I think you just said something, scripture talks about let your yes be yes and your no be no. But until you can stand, until I know who I am and I can stand and just stand in it, even if it's uncomfortable and even if you disagree with me and even if I can just stand, I'm immovable, but not obstinate, just immovable.
Yeah.
Then your yes has power, because when you say yes, it's not from a place of, I feel like I have to. It's a place of willingness, a place of choice and power. And when I say no, there's no more discussion to be had about it. It's from the same place of power. But it requires the strength to stand.
Our old marketing director said something really powerful one time. And she said something about letting your yes be your yes and your no be your no. And when you are firm in that, people don't question where they stand with you. And you don't leave people in this place of not understanding or wondering. It's just a yes. It's just a no. And this is it. And we did a lot of devotionals on boundaries, a lot. Nikki, this is where you begin. This is where I end, or, just like understanding boundaries. And boundaries are super important in relationships. Like
is that where you started saying no to tubing trips? Yeah.
I hate the springs. I hate the springs. I don't like being trapped. Once you're in there, you're in there.
In the tube? You can't get out of the tube, or the spring? What are we talking about? I'm stuck in this tube. I can't get out. That sounds like a terrifying problem.
It is. It's difficult for me to get in and out of the tube while I'm in the water as well. But once you're in the springs, you're in there. You're in there for the whole ride around the spring.
Yeah, for like 3 hours.
I don't want anything to do with that. There's gators in there. I don't want anything to do with that.
No, so that's when you knew you started healing, when you were like, saying no to the springs.
Well, and just saying no in general and not feeling like I had to follow it up with an explanation, and not feeling bad or feeling guilty about saying it, and just saying yes and feeling okay about my yes. and not feeling like, oh God, I'm doing this again, or, oh God, I have to pick that girl up, or I have to go to this meeting, or I have to do this. Like letting my yes be my yes and my no be my no, and feeling good and confident in those choices. And those are the things I want to do, not.
And then life has joy.
Mm-hmm.
When we talked with Lisa on the podcast a few weeks back, we spent a lot of time talking about joy, but when you go to pick up a girl because you have to,
mm-hmm.
some of your life is going by and you're not having a whole lot of fun. Mm-hmm. But when you say yes, that same amount of life is going by, but now there's some joy in it. There's purpose in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like time wasted. It doesn't feel like time lost.
Mm-hmm.
It feels
less sacrifice, more investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 More intentional.
Mm-hmm.
So one time, Stephanie said, when we were having the conversation about healing, you said something that I now put in my training on the Rethreaded process, and it's trauma is not my crutch.
Yeah.
Can you kind of give the background about where that came from and what that means, and kind of, and then we'll relate it back to the Rethreaded process.
Yeah. And I just actually saw something else about this earlier. Another friend of mine, she's an advocate out in Washington, and she had made a whole post about it. And she was like, she talked about how when your traumatic experiences start to cause me trauma, that's when we have an issue. And I've experienced these things. These things have happened to me. But because I have experienced these things does not give me the right to have bad behavior. It doesn't give me the right to cause harm to somebody else. It doesn't give me the right to go around and just bad behavior. These things have happened. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. These are things that I have to deal with, that I have to work through, and walk through life with. But I can't walk through life just like bleeding my trauma on everybody else and letting my trauma just be the reason why. Man, I yelled at my kids this morning, but I experienced a lot of trauma. So that's why. I experienced a lot of trauma. I yelled at my kids this morning. It's not because of my trauma. They spilled their blueberry smoothie. The only reason why. It's nothing to do with my trauma. And that's the thing, is I can't use my trauma as an excuse for poor behavior. I just can't. And it's not a good excuse. It's not a good excuse, because I know that I have trauma. What am I doing about it? What am I doing about it? And another girlfriend told me that, says, because I just had great friends who had all, worked on and done a lot of healing when I finally made it to the rooms. And so they were all really far ahead of me. And we had a girlfriend who was just, would always cancel on you last minute, and, would always was just not a good friend. She was just not a good friend. And it was always because of her trauma. And when she was sitting in a room with 4 other women that had experienced not the same, but different trauma. And my other friend, she just really said, you just can't walk through life using trauma as your crutch. And that just stabbed me in a good way. And I was like, man, I don't want trauma to be the reason why I can't have a good relationship with my family. I don't want trauma to be the reason why I can't parent my children well. I want trauma to be the reason why I can't hold a job. And I don't want trauma to be the reason why I can't have a partner, because it doesn't have to be. It is something that has happened. It is something that I have been given the tools to work through, to work on, to elevate above. It doesn't change it. It doesn't make it go away. It doesn't mean that I don't, sometimes get into a place where I remember that, or I don't see a place where I get triggered a little bit. It doesn't mean that that stuff doesn't happen, but it does mean that when I go into a conversation with another person like my mom, right? And I think about all the things that happened to me and the fact that, you know, she disowned me at one point. I could blame all of it. But a lot of blame in a lot of places. It's not her fault. So when I get into an argument with my mom, my trauma does not come through in that. And it doesn't need, there's no space for my trauma in that. This is just me and my mom having our argument. We don't really have arguments, but, you know, hypothetically, if this was to happen, this would be, but there's a lot of space for me to blame other people, but there's no need for it.
I mean, we talked about this a little bit, but what is, it legitimately happened to you. And yet when you heard this, hey, it doesn't have to be your crutch. You were empowered then to lay down the blame against the situation or the, what is, which gave you back the ability to own it and to take responsibility for tomorrow. Even though I'm not to blame for what happened to me, I am responsible for what I choose to do with it. And I know you talk about core in your training, and maybe you want to share a little bit of that, because that's been something we've kind of struggled through. Of, man, on one side you're saying, no, that's not fair. This thing happened to me. Why am I responsible for it? But what is, and the sooner you could figure that out, you got your life back. You got power back in your life, that your potential expanded the moment you were willing to take responsibility for something that wasn't your fault.
Because it would happen. It happened.
And now I can keep blaming it, and I'm stuck here forever, and it still has power over me. Or I can just acknowledge it is, take responsibility for what I do with it now, seek healing and move forward. And it's been a life changer in your life. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about core and your thoughts on core, but
well, I was thinking about this, is that if you're kind of listening to this podcast that you have to go through the process to get there. Like what I don't want people to hear when they're listening about this Rethreaded process, we're talking about taking pain and making it into your potential, that it takes time to get to that revelation without totally. I just remember someone telling me that maybe when I was like a young, angry 19-year-old at my family. And someone told me that at 19. And I was like, whatever. It was not my fault. I shouldn't have to deal with this. But it took a long time to get through the journey to accept it. Again, and you can't be in a hurry, because you can say that.
You can. And I wonder, though, if it's how we say it. Like,
maybe it is.
Like I wonder if we really can do that piece. We can own our situation quicker if we were given permission. And the way she phrased it to you is, this doesn't have to be this way. It's almost like you were given permission to take ownership. And maybe the way you heard it was, you have to go do this, I don't know. Because I don't think we talk about it much, that I can take responsibility without taking blame.
And shame.
And shame. Those are two separate things. Responsibility is power. Blame and shame destroys me. And I think we confuse the words blame and responsibility in our current lingo.
And sometimes I think you got to, like your friend, you have to have it modeled for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Instead of.
Or somebody's got to explain it enough to understand that it's a benefit to me. There's a benefit for me taking responsibility rather than a punishment for me.
And it doesn't make, just because you take responsibility for it, it doesn't make what happened right. And I think that's why part of my fear was like, if I take responsibility, that means the other person is right.
But that would be blame.
Right.
That would be blame. If I take blame, I let the other person off. But if I take responsibility, it's, okay, what now? That's what responsibility is. It's okay, happened. What now? They're still guilty. Yeah. But I'm not wasting my life on blame. Yeah. I'm just going to move on.
So there's this thing, and probably the foundation of all of this because I didn't come to Rethread until I was about 2 years out of life, maybe right about 18 months. And so the foundation of all of this was really built on the program. And so there's this thing that we do in the program. There's the steps that you do. And a part of that is, admitting you were powerless over, alcohol and that your life had become unmanageable, coming to believe that a power greater than yourself could restore you to sanity, turning your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand him, and then making a fearless and moral inventory of yourself, right? And all these things. So all the things that have happened. And then in this process, what I'm doing is I'm looking at who, what, why, right? What happened? In very short, 17 words or less is what I do it. I do it in columns. We all do it in columns. And then what did it affect? Did it affect my personal relationships, my sex relationships, my ambition, my pocketbook? And then in this fourth column, I'm looking, where were my wrongs? And on some of these things, it's that I drank on the back of them. I don't always play a part in these things, but holding on to these things and drinking on the back of these things is the part I'm owning. And so as a part of the program is looking for where I'm wrong in these situations. And if you have any type of, sponsor that's any good, they're going to tell you that you don't always play a part in it. Because for a lot of women, they've experienced some type of sexual abuse or, assault or any type of abuse, right? And so you don't own a part in that. Things happen to you, not because of you. That's something I try to really get across to any girl that I work with. Things happen to you, not because of you. But it is my responsibility to move forward. It is my responsibility to move forward. I can either drink on the back of that for the rest of my life, this one situation, or I can keep it moving.
Which reduces your potential and therefore gives that situation more power over the whole rest of your life.
It will consume me.
The longer
cut me off. Yeah. It will cut me off if I don't clear that out. And I mean, and it talks, and I see it happen. I see it happen so much. We don't clear these things out from us. And I just get angrier and angrier and angrier at the things that are disturbing me. And I'm not willing to stop and look. And I've been called out a time or two. And, and I get upset in the moment about things that are said to me, that things that maybe I did, that I didn't see in the moment that I was doing. And I go home and I write this down. I write you down on a piece of paper. And I write in 17 words or less what was said to me. And then I write what I was affected by. And then I figure out what my part to play in this was. And then I look at my part to play in this. And then I move forward from that. And so I don't always react in the moment in the best way, but having that tool to be able to take those things and go back and see what I can do to do better, how I can improve in some way, and not even improve. I don't always necessarily like the word improve, how I can do something differently. What can I do differently? Because I feel like when we say improve, feels like I'm doing bad. And I don't want to tell people they're doing bad. I want to tell, how can we do it different? How can we just do something different? And so having that tool, I think, really allowed me to see the trauma as a whole, to own it as not my own, it's not because of me. Yeah. Right. But
it's not shame.
It's not shame. It's just something that happened. And to stop letting it be my excuse, because I drank on top of the things that were happening to me for a long time. I drank on top of it. I drugged on top of it. I ran on top of it. And it was all because these things were happening to me. And these things were happening to me. I mean, for me, it started because of alcoholism, led me to homelessness, led me to trafficking, led me to drinking more on the back of trafficking. So for me, it was full circle.
And blame and shame, I think you said this to me, Jason. Blame and shame are the past. Responsibility and control are the future.
Yep.
And when you heal, it means that you determine the story of your thread. You can determine the next chapter.
Right.
Maybe that the past chapter was written for you, but this future chapter you're going to write. I don't know if that's the perfect analogy, but so when you were in the darkest part, what where you didn't know this yet, like we didn't know about blame and shame and trauma and PTSD and all this stuff, what started the forward journey for you?
Couple things. It was there was a couple things. First, the drugs and alcohol weren't working anymore. Nothing. I had a son who lived with his dad that I hadn't seen in, a few years. My family had disowned me. I had a daughter who was, I had given birth to a daughter while I was living in the streets, and she was in the NICU in the hospital getting ready to go into foster care, and nothing was blocking that out anymore. So this was all at the forefront of my mind constantly. And I ran into a girl off of Main Street, and she was sitting outside of a convenience store, and I picked her up because it was getting dark and she was pretty young and she was like really upset. So I picked her up and she came back to my hotel room and we were just hanging out, and she was telling me that she had just left Gateway Treatment Facility. They wouldn't let her see her baby. And so she left. And I had heard of Gateway one time before, like 3 years prior. I'd gone there for detox 3 days and then left and hadn't been back since. And something about her saying that just triggered something in my mind. And I didn't think about it again for a while. But so about a month later, I was having just this horrible day. I was having a horrible day. Most days were horrible, right? But this one was just incredibly bad. And my sugar daddy, I'll just call it what it is, he had picked me up and he had taken me to get something to eat. And in the parking lot, and we go in, and I was just really mean to the people that were working. I was really mean, and it was uncalled for. This person was obviously having her bad day, and I was having a bad day, and I was really mean. And so I went back out, and I had like this like red box, like free movie gift card or something. I went back in and I gave her this gift card, and I said, "I'm sorry, I was being mean. Get a movie, get some popcorn. I hope you have a better night." And I went back out, and this was the first time I had no like relationship with God. I'd never known God. My family just wasn't, we weren't anti-God or anything. We just didn't go to church. And I just, in that moment, I threw my hands in the air and I said, "Man, if you don't have something better for me, then this is just cruel. You are just being cruel." And I got back in the car and I went back to the hotel, and there was a girl in another room next door because there are blocks of girls. And so there's a girl in the room next door, and I'm sitting there with her, and I'm like crying. I'm having such a bad day, and she knows I'm having a bad day, and I'm like telling her a little bit about it. And she starts rifling through her purse, and she pulls out this 14-karat gold Star of David. And she's like, "Something's telling me to give this to you." And I don't know anything about God or religion or anything. I know that this is a symbol of God. I know this much. And all of a sudden, that thought of Gateway just starts to consume my mind for the next 3 days. And I was like, I'm going to go. And I just told myself I was going to go. And I did. And I went. And I was in detox for 10 days, but the first meeting that I had at Gateway Treatment Facility inpatient was Miss Famita. And she's recently passed. She was a lovely woman. And she's sitting at the front, and she's doing the spirituality meeting. And around her necklace is a Star of David. And I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I just knew that was like my tangible sign, because I needed something tangible because I'm real hard-headed. Like, you guys know me. I need something a little bit more intense and intentional. God was very intentional with me. And he really led me with breadcrumbs into where I needed to go. And it was just, and from there, I just felt like I was walking on water. Just felt like I was in it to win it from the beginning. And it's been hard, though. It's been hard because I hear you talking about people are going to hear this and, think that, this is like this easy process, or they, it is still painful. It is still hard because every season offers something new. And I think about it. And so the mosaic, right? And it's got the little cracks in the glass on the end. That's really the blossom side is where there's all those cracks, but you have all the little new nuggets that Kate's been coming out and putting on it. And it showed like you can be thriving and healing at the same time.
The paradox.
Yeah.
Paradox.
Yeah. And that mural is ever evolving because it just continues to get these new little nuggets on it.
Yeah. For everybody's listening, Stephanie's talking about the mural that we have on the campus at Rethreaded that tells the journey from darkness to light that a survivor goes through. And it was perfect when it was created, but now it's living.
Mm-hmm.
And so age occurs, and Kate, one of the designers, still comes out and loves and cares for it. And it's as beautiful today as it was the first day, but it's getting more and more personality.
Even more beautiful. I love it. It was, and I'm just like, and I talk about it now in my tour, and I'm like, you wouldn't know that was there unless I told you. Just like you don't know the things inside of me that are broken and healing unless I tell you. And it just, that mural just continues to speak to me in a different way. Every time I go out there and I look at it and I just see these new little nuggets on it, and it grows with us. And I just, so somebody can come and listen to this podcast at any stage of their journey and know it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. It's going to be painful. It's going to suck. It's not easy. It will test you and you will fail. I will fail. I fail sometimes, right? But there's resiliency. There is getting back up again. Like, I do not do things well all the time. I have to redo things sometimes, and I can ask for a redo. And that's okay, right? I think maybe not fail is probably not like the best word, but like, I will not always do things right. And I will not always be perfect. And that is so okay, because I just can take it as a new opportunity to learn how to do things differently, do it a little bit better, do it a little bit differently.
No, I mean, I struggle a lot with perfection. So the perfection is, if perfection's your goal, and then blame and shame come in, anxiety. I mean, it's just all, it's all close.
Yeah.
And when you can find relief from that and be able to hold the paradox of thriving and healing in the same, that's healing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I feel like it is part of being fully human.
But that's what expanding your potential does. It opens it up so you can hold. There's space. There's space for both. I can still have this life full of joy and stuff. But there's still some stuff in there that I'm healing. And so, but it's big enough to hold it all now. And I don't have to stop life to go heal.
Yeah.
I can just keep on living, keep on enjoying my life, keep on growing, and let the healing come intentionally as I move along.
I mean, specifically from like you and Shirley, when you talk about healing with your family, and when you talk about like this Christmas, My brother texted me this. The next Christmas, it had 2 words. The next Christmas, it had 4. And your ability to stay in that discomfort was so convicting. How did you stay in the hardest things? So I'm going to give context, I guess, for this is that part of what I watch women who have gone through human trafficking is on the other side, they're dealing with the trauma from trafficking, but then they're also rebuilding their lives, which means rebuilding their family relationships, which often was a result of being in trafficking and being pulled out of life.
Mm-hmm.
So then you're left with the trauma. Your responsibility then becomes to build relationships with your family.
Yeah.
Even though this thing did not happen to you, like to accept the responsibility that I will rebuild this.
Yeah.
And take time.
Yeah. That was probably, that was the most difficult and most beautiful thing I've ever experienced in my life. And probably something that has, at this moment, I can say, has solidified my faith in the way that whole thing came to fruition. Because I remember my brother hadn't talked to me for years before I got sober. It had been maybe 3 years before, and then I got sober. And I remember specifically meeting with my mom and my mom telling me that my brother had said, well, I don't care if she gets 365 days. I'm not going to talk to her because I got like 30 days or something like that. And I was so thrilled about it. And he was like, well, I don't care if she gets 365 days. And that was a goal for me. I was like, 366 and that's going to be it. And that year came and went and nothing. And I got to that process of like making amends and stuff. And he didn't want anything to do with it. And he would read my messages and he wouldn't reply. And to my attempts to make amends. And it was birthday. It was his birthday. I would send him, happy birthday, Joshua. And he would say, thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. And it was like years. But I remember I was leaving. God has spoken to me very tangibly a couple of times. And I was leaving Thanksgiving dinner. And he wasn't there again. And this was, I was living with Tamara and Christopher. So I was about 2.5, 3 years sober. And I'm leaving Thanksgiving dinner and he wasn't there again. And, he still hasn't talked to me. And we're coming up on about 5 years since I'd talked to him. He's my only brother. So it was just me, him, and my mom growing up my whole life. And so, and I'm in the car and I'm almost home and the song, Good, Good Father comes on. Mm. And right at the part where he says, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like. This picture in my head of one of my friends. It was one of my male friends just pops into my head. And God just told me, I have given you a brother sufficient enough. Mm. And I just wept. And that is how I held on. Mm. And I just embraced the brothers that I have in the program and how they love me without condition. And those years they went by and I just continued to reach out and do my best. And when he started to get really sick, I was actually on my way to go see Elevation Worship in Orlando. And my mom calls me and she tells me how sick he is and that she had just seen him and, all the things. And she was like, we got to do something. And in that moment, I was like, it's my time to shine, right? Like I can call Christopher and I can get him insurance and I can, get him the things that he needs so he can get to the doctor, so he can start taking care of this, so he can get better. And I can pay for the insurance and he needs money and I can supplement his income. Like I can do these things, right? I can do these things. I can help him. And then he'll have to talk to me. Right. And I was just like, And I knew this was my moment and I was going to do that. And I got to that concert and they're playing the song Graves in the Gardens. And in the song, it says, and the Lord just speaks to me through worship. And this is just how he seems to get to me, which is fine, right? Like, I'll take it because this is where I hear. And it says, he's the only one who can. And he says it over and over again. And I was like, man, I need to just serve him as my brother in Christ and not as my brother, and not serving him to receive, but serving him because he's in need. And so got him the insurance, and I would, I'd give my mom the money. She would give it to my brother, and it has nothing to do with me. I'm like, don't tell him it's from me because he's not going to want it if it's from me. And my mom can't hold water. So about a month later, my brother calls me, and
he called you.
He called me.
Mm-hmm.
He called me, and my mom had told him what had been happening. And
what did you think when you had the phone? It was your brother.
I didn't really know. Like, I didn't really know. I had been talking a lot more about him with my mom. So, because for a long time, it just was like an undiscussed subject. My grandma would tell my brother, you just get over it. Just suck it up. That's how my family's been forever. Just suck it up. But I didn't really, I just reacted sanely and normally because I just feel like that was like a gifting to me in that moment. Because I feel like God just like gifted me a lot of things in that moment. And so and we just connected, and it was just water under the bridge, and it was just a brother and a sister. And I just got to spend time with him. He got to meet my children, or he knew my son, but he got to meet my daughter, and I got to take care of him. And I got to take care of my mom in the same time. And God is so good. Because at the same time, I had been asked to do, towards the end of his life, at the same time, I had been asked to do the steps, to come as a speaker each week and do the steps at a local halfway house. And the way I had built out the amount of weeks that I needed, I had built in an extra week just in case. And it was on Sunday night, and my brother passed away on Sunday night. But I know that God has done this to me. And somebody just asked me to do the steps again. And I'm like, what's he prepping me for? Because this is the third time it's happened. But I know that he said, this is where you need to be. So he keeps me planted where I need to be in the middle of these hard seasons. And he reminds me, this is your community. Because at the same time I was in that bad relationship, I was doing the steps. When my son's stepmom died, I was doing the steps. While my brother was dying, I was doing the steps. Because I had somewhere I had to be, and people were relying on me to be there. Because again, this is something I can drink on the back of. We can allow our trauma, we can allow our hurt, we can allow our pain
circumstances
to take us away.
But the power of purpose.
Puts
potential right back in you. Yeah.
I had a purpose. I missed that week, and I showed up that next week. And the week before I had talked about making amends. And I got to share the story of making amends with my brother. And then the next week I got to come back and I got to tell him that I held his hand while he died. The most beautiful thing that's ever happened in my life. And it will really just, if you go in and you just walk with intentionality, with purpose, with a true desire to do right to the best of your ability, because I am human and I am fallible always. The provisions are great. And God has been so good to me with everything that he has gifted me. My relationships with my friends, my relationships with my family, my job, my volunteer work, all of these things are just gifts. They're just rewards. And who am I to be rewarded? A person like me? I don't deserve any of these things. And just the more I get to just like pour into this place and get to pour into this city, and I get to be in this community and be a part of this rethreading process. Thanks, Jason. The more I get to be a part of this and I get to see this happening in the lives of the people around me, like the more I believe in it. And it's a beautiful thing.
Well, at the end, we usually have our guests share a message for the people that are listening. Like what do you want to tell them?
Mm-hmm.
I think something that I had to learn after all of these things, you are enough. You are not too much. You are the right amount for the perfect person. And that is all. I wore a ring on my finger for a year that said, you are enough. And I am not too much. You are never too much for the right person. You're never too much for the right people. Because I will let my baggage make me feel like I am too much. And it's just not true. So I think I want people to know that you are enough just as you are. You are never too much.
Amen.